Okay, so picture this. You've finally done it. Years of grinding, years of extra payments. Maybe you even threw your entire bonus at that principal balance last year. And now you're holding that paper that says zero balance. House is yours, completely yours. You should feel free, right? You should feel safe. But instead, something's off. Your bank account is empty. That emergency fund? Gone. You threw it at the mortgage. Those investments you kept saying you'd get to later never happened. All that wealth you built up over the years, it's not in your pocket anymore. It's locked behind those walls, trapped like cash sitting behind bars that you can see but can't actually touch. And here's the uncomfortable question nobody wants to ask. What happens now if something goes wrong? What if you lose your job next month? What if there's a medical emergency? That equity, that wealth, it's just sitting there, dead money. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, wealth psychology, and why some of the most common sense financial advice actually keeps people stuck for decades, while others accelerate past them using completely different playbooks. And here's the thing that's going to sound borderline crazy at first. That paid-off house? The one you've been fantasizing about? The one financial gurus tell you should be your ultimate goal? It might actually be the most dangerous asset you can own. Now, before you click away, and I know that statement probably triggered something in you, just hear me out, because what I'm about to share might fundamentally change how you think about wealth, security, and what it actually means to be financially free. We've been handed a narrative. Pay off your mortgage, own your home free and clear, and you'll be safe. But what if that story is incomplete? What if it's actually backwards? What if the very thing you believe will protect you is quietly making you more vulnerable, like a man staring at a fortune he can never reach? Let's talk about it. The emotional math versus the real math. Okay, so first, we need to acknowledge something important. The desire to pay off your house is not stupid. It's not irrational. It comes from a really deep, really human place. There's something profoundly satisfying about ownership, about looking at a piece of property and knowing that it's yours, completely yours. Not the bank's, not some lender's, yours. And you know what? That feeling is real. That peace of mind has value. I'm not here to dismiss that entirely.
But, and this is a big but, we have to separate emotional math from actual math. Because the decisions that feel safest aren't always the decisions that are safest. And the financial moves that seem like the obvious right choice are sometimes keeping us from building the kind of wealth that creates real, lasting security. So let me ask you a question. And this is one of those questions that seems simple, but actually unravels a lot of assumptions when you really sit with it. What does your home equity actually do for you? Like, seriously, think about it. You pay off your house. Congratulations. You now have, let's say, $400,000 worth of equity sitting inside your property. That money is where exactly? It's locked inside the walls. It's in the foundation. It's in the roof you replaced 3 years ago. And what is that $400,000 earning you right now? Zero. Literally 0%. That equity is not growing. It's not compounding. It's not working for you in any meaningful way. It's just sitting there, like a really expensive paperweight that happens to keep the rain off your head. Now, here's where people usually push back. They say, but Nick, my house is appreciating. The value goes up every year. And sure, yeah, property values generally trend upward over time, but here's the thing most people miss. Your home appreciates the same amount whether you have a mortgage or not. Let me say that again, because it's important. If your house goes up in value by $20,000 this year, it goes up by $20,000 whether you owe the bank $300,000 or you owe them nothing. Your home doesn't know. It doesn't care. The appreciation happens regardless of your loan balance. So that argument doesn't actually hold up. What you've done by paying off your house is taken money that could be growing, could be compounding, and locked it away in an illiquid asset where it generates no return. And that's actually kind of dangerous when you think about it. The illiquidity trap. Okay, here's where things get a little uncomfortable, but stay with me.
One of the core principles of building real financial security, the kind wealthy people understand intuitively, is maintaining access to liquid capital, money you can actually use, money that's available when opportunities arise, or, more importantly, when emergencies hit. A paid-off house is, by definition, the opposite of liquid. Think about it this way. Let's say you've achieved the dream. Your house is completely paid off, no mortgage payment. You're feeling great about life. And then something happens. Maybe you lose your job unexpectedly. Maybe there's a medical emergency. Maybe the economy tanks, and suddenly you need cash to survive for 6 months, a year, maybe longer. Where do you get that money? Your house, your biggest asset, the thing that's supposed to represent your security. Except you can't just grab $20,000 from your kitchen counter. You can't peel a few $100 bills off your living room wall. That equity is locked away. Your options? You could try to get a home equity line of credit, but guess what happens to home equity lines of credit during economic downturns? Banks freeze them. They reduce limits. They get really conservative about who they lend to precisely at the moment you need them most. Or you could sell your house in a down market, when prices are depressed, when buyers have all the leverage. See the problem here? The asset that was supposed to protect you is now forcing you to make terrible financial decisions because you can't access the value locked inside it. Here's a little personal observation that I think about a lot. The times when you're most likely to need money are often the exact same times when it's hardest to get it. That's not coincidence. That's how financial systems work. Liquidity dries up when demand for liquidity spikes. And if all your wealth is sitting inside the walls of your house, you're essentially hoping that nothing bad ever happens, which is not exactly a strategy. What banks understand that most people don't. Now, let me tell you something kind of funny about banks. Not funny haha, more like funny, oh wow, that's actually incredibly revealing. Banks love giving mortgages. They fight for the opportunity to lend you money to buy a house. They offer competitive rates, they advertise constantly, they make the process as smooth as possible. Why? Because a mortgage is one of the safest, most profitable products a bank can offer. The loan is secured by a physical asset. They collect interest for 15 or 30 years, and the collateral, your house, generally maintains its value over time. But here's the thing. When banks have their own money, do you think they let it sit idle? Do you think they take their capital and just park it somewhere, earning nothing? Absolutely not. Banks use leverage. They take every dollar they have and put it to work, generating returns. They understand that money sitting still is money being wasted, that idle capital is expensive capital. And yet, they've convinced regular people that the opposite is true, that you should take your money and lock it away in your house, earning 0% while they use your monthly payments to generate returns on their side of the ledger. I'm not saying banks are evil or that mortgages are scams. They're not. But it's worth noticing the asymmetry here. The institutions that understand money best are giving you one piece of advice while doing the complete opposite with their own capital. Maybe, just maybe, we should pay attention to what they do, not what they say. The opportunity cost nobody talks about. Let's get into some actual numbers for a second, because this is where the argument really starts to crystallize. Say you have a mortgage with a 6% interest rate. That's a pretty typical rate in today's environment. Your monthly payment is going toward interest and principal, slowly paying down that loan. Now, conventional wisdom says pay extra toward that principal. Every extra dollar you pay saves you from paying interest on that dollar for the remaining life of the loan. It's guaranteed returns. And that logic isn't wrong exactly, it's just incomplete. Because here's the question nobody asks. What else could that dollar do? Over the last century, the stock market has averaged roughly 10% annual returns. If you factor in inflation, we'll call it 7% real returns. Even if you're conservative and assume maybe 7% nominal going forward, you're still talking about a return that beats your mortgage interest rate. So every dollar you throw at your mortgage is a dollar that isn't being invested elsewhere, a dollar that could be compounding year after year, decade after decade. Let me give you a concrete example, because I think this makes it real. Say you have $100,000 in cash. You could throw it at your mortgage and eliminate that debt, or you could invest it. At 7% annual returns, that $100,000 becomes roughly $197,000 in 10 years. In 20 years, it's nearly $387,000. In 30 years, you're looking at over $761,000. Meanwhile, the money you put into your house equity, still $100,000, just sitting there, not growing, not compounding. That gap, the difference between what your money could have become and what it actually became, that's opportunity cost, and it's massive. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but Nick, what about risk? The stock market goes down. My house equity is safe. And sure, the stock market fluctuates, but here's the thing about that equity in your house. It fluctuates too. Property values drop, markets correct. Your home equity can evaporate just as quickly as stock value. You just don't see it because you're not checking a daily ticker. The difference is that while your stocks are down, you can still sell them. You can still access that money. You can still redeploy capital if needed. When your home equity drops, it's just gone, locked inside an illiquid asset that you can only access by taking on debt or selling the entire property. Which one actually sounds more dangerous? The tax angle everyone forgets. Okay, let's talk about something that makes most people's eyes glaze over but is actually really important: the tax implications of mortgage interest. If you're in the United States and you itemize your deductions, mortgage interest is tax deductible. What this means, basically, is that the government is subsidizing a portion of your interest costs. Let's say you're paying 6% interest and you're in the 24% tax bracket. That tax deduction effectively reduces your true interest cost to something more like 4.5% or so. The government is basically giving you a discount on your borrowing costs. When you pay off your mortgage, that deduction disappears. So now, not only is your money locked in an illiquid asset earning zero, but you've also given up a tax benefit that was reducing your overall cost of carrying that mortgage. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The money you could have invested instead, in many cases, you can structure those investments in tax-advantaged ways too. Retirement accounts, long-term capital gains rates, all sorts of strategies that people who understand money use to minimize their tax burden. When you look at the full picture, the opportunity cost, the liquidity constraints, and the tax implications, paying off your mortgage early starts to look less like a smart financial move and more like an expensive emotional decision. What wealthy people actually do. You know what wealthy people don't do? They don't race to pay off their mortgages. Seriously, talk to people who have built substantial wealth, not inherited it, but actually built it, and you'll notice something interesting. They're almost never mortgage-free until they're much older, if ever. And it's not because they can't afford to pay it off. They absolutely could. They just choose not to, because they understand something crucial. Cheap debt is a tool, and tools, when used properly, build things. A mortgage, especially at historically low rates, which granted aren't what they were a few years ago, but still, represents borrowed money that you can deploy elsewhere for higher returns. You're essentially arbitraging the difference between your borrowing cost and your investment returns. The wealthy use this leverage constantly. They borrow against assets to invest in other assets. They keep their capital working always instead of locking it away. Meanwhile, middle-class families are told to pay off their houses as fast as possible, to put every extra dollar toward their mortgage to achieve that debt-free status that sounds so appealing. The result? Two different trajectories. One group builds wealth by keeping capital liquid and deployed. The other group builds equity in a single illiquid asset and wonders why they never seem to get ahead despite doing all the right things. I'm not saying you should live recklessly or take on ridiculous amounts of debt. That's not the point. The point is that there's a difference between consumer debt, the kind that drains your wealth, and strategic debt that helps you build it. And a mortgage, used thoughtfully, can absolutely be strategic debt. The concentration risk problem. Here's another angle that doesn't get enough attention: concentration risk. One of the most fundamental principles of investing is diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Spread your risk across different assets, different sectors, different geographies. Yet for most American families, their house represents the majority of their net worth. Sometimes 60%, 70%, even 80% of everything they own is locked inside a single piece of real estate. That's not diversified at all. That's a massive bet on one specific asset in one specific location in one specific market. And sure, real estate tends to do well over time, but individual properties in individual cities can and do lose value. Local economies change, industries move, neighborhoods decline. When you accelerate paying off your mortgage, you're doubling down on this concentration. You're taking money that could be invested in stocks, bonds, REITs, or other assets and funneling it all into the same place. You're putting more and more eggs in the same basket. If something happens to that basket, if your local market crashes, if there's an environmental disaster, if the major employer in your town closes down, you don't have other baskets to fall back on. True security comes from diversification, from having multiple streams of assets that can support you, from not being completely dependent on any single thing. A paid-off house doesn't give you that. It gives you the illusion of security while actually increasing your vulnerability. So what should you do? Okay, so I've spent a lot of time tearing down the conventional wisdom. Let me actually offer something constructive. Here's a framework I think makes sense for most people. First, make your mortgage payments, just your regular payments. Don't stress about paying extra. That monthly payment is perfectly fine, and the loan is structured to be manageable over time. Second, take whatever extra money you would have thrown at your mortgage and invest it instead in diversified index funds, in retirement accounts, in assets that actually generate returns and can be accessed when you need them. Third, maintain an emergency fund. This is non-negotiable. Liquid cash that you can access immediately when life happens, because life will happen. Fourth, if you really want to be aggressive about building wealth, consider whether that home equity could be working harder for you. Home equity lines of credit, when used responsibly to invest in appreciating assets or income-producing opportunities, can be powerful tools. But, and this is important, this requires discipline and financial literacy. It's not for everyone. Fifth, reconsider your timeline for being debt-free. Maybe being mortgage-free at 75 after a lifetime of keeping your capital working is actually better than being mortgage-free at 55 with minimal investments. The goal isn't to never pay off your house. The goal is to pay it off at the right time for the right reasons with the right understanding of what you're trading off. The caveat I have to mention. Look, I want to be clear about something. This isn't one-size-fits-all advice. If you're close to retirement and you want the peace of mind of no mortgage payment, there's value in that. If you have a hard time not spending money and you know that paying down your mortgage is the only way you'll build any equity at all, then fine, pay down the mortgage. If you have a really high interest rate mortgage and limited investment knowledge, the math might be different for you. Context matters. Personal situation matters. Risk tolerance matters. But what I hope you take away from this is a willingness to question the narrative, to actually run the numbers for your specific situation, to understand that what feels safe and what is safe aren't always the same thing. Because the dangerous thing about a paid-off house isn't the house itself. It's the false sense of security it provides. It's the opportunity cost you never see. It's the liquidity you gave up without realizing what you traded away. Conclusion. So let's bring this all together. You've been told your whole life that paying off your house is the ultimate financial goal, that owning your home free and clear represents security, stability, and success. And on an emotional level, yeah, I get it. That story's appealing. It makes sense in a gut-feeling kind of way. But when you actually look at the mechanics, the liquidity constraints, the opportunity costs, the risk tolerance, the tax implications, the difference between what you're giving up and what you're getting in return, the picture is more complicated. Wealthy people understand that money needs to move, needs to work, needs to compound over time. They don't let their capital sit idle just because it feels safe. And here's what I hope you take from today. I'm not asking you to go out and take reckless financial risks. I'm not telling you that mortgages are always good or that paying off your house is always wrong. What I am asking is that you think for yourself, that you question the conventional wisdom, that you actually examine whether the decisions you're making are driven by real financial logic or by emotional narratives you've absorbed without ever really questioning. Because the difference between people who build lasting wealth and people who stay stuck often comes down to this: the ability to see past what feels true to understand what actually is true. Your house is shelter, it's home, it's meaningful, but it's also just one part of your financial picture. And if you let it become the only part, if you pour all your resources into it while neglecting everything else, you might wake up one day with a beautiful paid off house and realize you traded your flexibility, your options, and your true financial security for something that only looked like safety. You deserve better than that. So run the numbers, challenge your assumptions, make decisions with your eyes open. And remember, real security isn't about eliminating all debt. It's about building wealth across multiple dimensions, maintaining liquidity for life's inevitable surprises, and understanding how money actually works, not just how we've been told it works. You've got this. Now go make some moves.